Hi, everybody. Hope you enjoyed your lunch. I'm just peeking this head for a minute because I want to explain a story. This morning I was jumping into the taxi, and a taxi driver looking at me and saying, "Are you an artist?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Are you an actor?" I said, "No, I'm an IT consultant." But then I thought, wow, that's actually right. You know, you are an artist, a kind of actor. If you're in coaching, consulting businesses around, who's actually consultants? Are there any consultants in here? The rest are real workers? Or you do some, I don't know, product development or, okay. Who's doing Scrum? Wow, a lot of you. Is it going very well? Okay. So there are some issues. Anybody doing Kanban? Wow, that's good. So let's talk about it. No worries. This is neither about Scrum, nor is it about Kanban, nor is it about another method. It's basically about a specific context you might be in and figure out where can we go further from here. And boosting your Scrum, that could be already a very challenging idea. I call it a Kanban perspective. Some might call it Scrumban. Who's ever heard that? Again, it's not another method. It's basically just a kind of philosophical approach, applying certain principles and rules in a very specific context. Actually, I was prepared receiving a question in the beginning, which was about complexity. And I wanted to tell a little bit about complexity. You know, all our businesses are about complexity. And that's my two kids. And I understand well what complexity means. No planning possible, no control possible. You can be the boss, but it just doesn't work out. Kids always, challenge you. They're doing something different. And I think that's what's basically happening in organizations, even if you are the boss. Now, that's a little bit about me. I think that's important. That's about me. That's where I'm from. I'm from Austria. Anybody knows Austria? The sound of music. Yeah, that's how it looks like where I live. It's just a joke. I always try to put that. I live in Vienna. Normal city like this one, like Athens. Probably Athens is nicer. Really enjoy the south, the Mediterranean atmosphere. What I do for a living, we run a company where we have agile coaches, lean coaches, guys who are focusing on leadership, on change, making stuff happen. And we also focus, I don't have it here, even on a specific domain nowadays, which is much about digitalization. I know it's a buzzword, it's another buzzword, but we also know there is a lot of things happening. A lot of startups out there, a lot of growing platforms, a lot of big companies growing up. And that puts a lot more on risk for most established companies. And you know what? Agile, Scrum, and all these methods suddenly become unimportant. So many organizations out there just are after the next one. No, we've got no time for this Agile. We've got to go ahead. We have to focus now on digitalization. And if it only means how to get your email better organized. Okay. Now, let's start with a context. And the context here is Scrum, very obviously. As you said, Scrum, a lot of you are doing Scrum. A lot of you have challenges, but obviously, in the beginning, it might have been a real success. I'm doing a lot of Scrum projects with organizations on a larger scale. Sometimes it's just a few teams. And there is always, in the beginning, usually a very, much pride in there, lots of energy. People start loving what this whole thing is about. They start loving how this work can be about. And my approach is like, it's finally not the destination. For me, my personal approach, or for my personal idea, is not, to have the whole company of either size, at the end of the day, all doing Scrum, following a certain rhythm. For me, it's basically a good starter, where, for example, we start separation of concerns. We separate, these different silos, and we get them refocused on what the real business is all about. Somebody is now finally taking care about the product, about a real product, not just tasks, but really we want to get a great valuable product out of the door. Somebody else, a team usually, or more teams, are looking at how we get really stuff out of the door without being just busy, but really getting it out of the door. And then there are other guys who are helping to make this actually happen within a complex environment. That's the Scrum Masters. So that's usually a very energetic starter. Unfortunately, it's not, always that easy after a while. I'm not sure how long you practice Scrum already, but usually if you're into it for a few sprints, maybe half a year, most organizations figure out there are a couple of issues coming up here. Not sure about your environments, whether it's a larger company where suddenly it's not so clear that people are really about to collaborate. Might be sometimes not so easy to get testers who really used to be, professional testers into the team and just say, okay, we're all doing everything permanently and then we get it done after 2 weeks. They might need another sprint and they might need some other things and they might need their own profession. And the team might not get anything out, releasable as it's nowadays called, after 2 weeks. So it's basically there's some code, but it's basically not fulfilling our own standards. Product owners, feeding the teams, they are filling up backlogs endlessly and maybe without knowing why, or at least not having an easy time to align various stakeholders and then come up and say, okay, I do now a kind of prioritization, but how? And so after a while, you might find a Scrum environment quite challenged to make actually progress. And then we have, retrospectives and a couple of feedback loops in there where we hope that we can make a change here. But, after a few games in our retrospectives, after, the standard stuff coming always back, teams get more and more, used to what's going on here. And if they look back now for half a year or whatever, they might see, well, we did some improvements, as I just said. People are a little bit more self-organized, obviously. They might more enjoy what's going on. There might be more transparency now in the room. But did we really achieve what we dreamed about? Maybe not. Now, the question is, how do we actually know if it works? What's actually important if we engage for a Scrum environment which really is about creating impact? And if I talk about impact, it's obviously about end-to-end. It's not just running Scrum in a small team, and then they're delivering in a sort of water Scrum fall something in front of the door of the data center guys, or it's not yet getting out to customers. It's not getting feedback, but it's somehow stuck inside the organization. Or they're really perfectly fast, but the next team, because there are more teams, because the application is more complex, they cannot digest what the first team actually delivers. So they're basically unbalanced. Or one team depends upon the other, and they just say, well, it's not our job. So end-to-end really is a harder game instead of just doing Scrum in a small team. How many of you are rather working with small teams? I'd just be interested, like startups, like up to 10 people, up to 20 people. Okay, about 50% of the room. Okay, it's at least a probably easier life, but still not as easy as probably to get really stuff out, because there's always more to do than just focusing on a single product. So I won't dive into that now. I'll rather look at it and say, well, what comes up usually? There is this saying in the Agile Manifesto. We found out better ways how to do software, and we want to teach others how to do it too. And then there are others who might say, okay, you just have to try harder. You just have to follow the Scrum rules better. Like Jeff Sutherland says, 80% of the companies in Silicon Valley, they basically get nothing out after each sprint. So it's basically always just piling up. It's half-done work. And they do not get their own definition of done somehow working. And so he basically complains and says, I didn't teach people or tell them about Scrum so that they just do anything arbitrarily, produce crap or whatever. So why don't they do the method better? Yeah, that's easy to say. The challenge here is, if you again look to the good advice, there is only one way, and it can only be your own way. It's a little bit philosophical, I know. It can only be a specific context-specific way for each organization on its own. Now, the game actually keeps, going up. While we are having problems, while we struggle with what we do already, competition on the market is basically taking over. And the pressure increases. Digitalization is really something out there. And it basically means, first of all, we don't know what we should focus on. So what will the product owners do? How will they make decisions? Obviously, it's not only about a product owner. It's about product managers. It's about senior management. It's about the whole company. How do they make decisions? Is it still based upon hierarchy, upon power, upon belief? I believe this product will make us successful. Or do we have a kind of platform, a system where people can trust each other and understand that they work after the same thing, that they share a common purpose, and they have an understanding what they will do now and what they will leave out? And that's not easy. That's very hard to say. If you look at Apple in the former days, there were obviously some better decisions how to get products out of the door, what to focus on and what not to focus on. Now, leadership nowadays at Apple, I've got no idea. I've never been there. I'm just a consumer, and I've got quite a lot of products from them. But I just look at what's coming out recently, and if you look at the two earphones, the wireless ones, well, it looks a little bit strange. I'm not sure if Steve Jobs would have, made this decision. If you know the new mouse, how it is being, charged, you have to put it on its back and stick the cable into its belly, and then it's being charged. Or if you charge the pencil, you have to stick it, underneath the iPad, and it looks, like a weapon. And a lot of decisions where I've got the feeling these guys are not talking to each other anymore, but people are just trying to get stuff out without consideration. Now, what that means, we have to step back. We need to engage our system in a different way and figure out to say, if on the one hand side, we need faster feedback, we need to get to the market faster, we need to speed up, then this means continuous deployment, continuous delivery. You heard already today a little bit about the differentiation, maybe. And on the other hand side, we have to figure out a continuous discovery process. So companies somehow have to figure out how can we make this work, that on both sides, on both ends of the whole value stream, we're getting more sensors in place so that the whole organization can better act upon what's going out there. And that means we need two things. We need to better sense and understand what's going out on the market. Most product owners, product owner teams, organizations, and teams are totally overworked. And they've got no time to look at the market because they've got already a full backlog and say, I need these things done, no matter if I get it next year or the other year. There's no opportunity to actually think beyond and get a kind of sense and respond model into your organization. Now, still, if you're running Scrum, if you're doing all these Agile methods, these are the core questions. People want to know, when will I get it? So senior managers might come and say, when will we get it? Or customers might come and say, if it's tomorrow, it's too late. Or if it's next week, it's too late. And as an organization, on the other hand side, it would be very interesting to understand if we've got a backlog, do we just, process one item after the other? Or is there a possibility to wait until the very last moment, the last responsible moment? That could be very helpful for certain features. If those features are very innovative, very risky, it would be obviously very better to have a distinction when we started and say, let's wait for the very last moment and figure out if there's new information coming. And we might even drop it instead of just say, the sooner we start it, the earlier we finish it, no matter if anybody needs it. But we need a system in place which helps us to make these decisions. Talking about portfolios, talking about mixing portfolios and getting certain products in the line, do we have the right skills? How do those Scrum teams in the various departments actually perform? Can they actually do the job we need them to do? So how do we prioritize? By business value? Hopefully not. How do we make decisions here, business decisions, which are attached to risk, to business risk? And last but not least, the big one, before we enter the scaling arena, because we just say, okay, we can't continue here anymore. We just don't have one team. We've got many teams, so we need another blueprint because there are so many dependencies. And the blueprint hopefully will help us. And then there are all these safe or unsafe approaches on the market. And I'm not sure if anyone yet reached their target. I just understand that one case study after the other is somehow competing against each other in the same company showing different scaling frameworks. So, there are certain companies who say, well, yeah, we succeeded with less, and the others said, same department, actually, we succeeded with SAFe. So I don't know what's going on there. Yeah, what about quality? Speed is not everything. So we need to get all these questions somehow answered, and we need to basically align as a company, as an organization for it. Yeah, finally, when we will get feedback. That's obviously very relevant for the teams. Now, here's a case study from Siemens Healthcare, which was done by Dan Vacanti, one of the pioneers in the Kanban world. And it was quite interesting because this picture, you don't have to dive too much into it if you don't read the text or don't want to read the text, basically shows how lead time was distributed for several items in the Scrum organization, in the Scrum teams. And what it basically shall show you is basically there was no possibility for predictability. So everything could happen. And if you just look at the second picture here, this diagram talks about size of stories. So smaller stories down here, larger stories in story points up here. And then you've got low lead time and high lead time. And obviously you would imagine that should be somehow a correlation. There should be a correlation, larger stories taking larger and vice versa. It wasn't. There was any kind of arbitrary relation. So the same short or small story size was taking short time, average time, long time. And for a long lead time, you had small stories, large stories, any kind of size. What does that tell us? Is basically you cannot answer the questions I showed you before. No chance. You've got a system, everybody doing Scrum, they're trying their best, but the system itself is somehow not working. It's not predictable, and there are a couple of systemic issues in there, which make it so hard to get answers to what I showed you before. And the problem here is that we basically do not understand the system, because things like just looking at story points and velocity, which you might know if you're into Scrum. I think most of you are. Just don't tell you anything. Now, what to do about it? Obviously, we've got a systemic problem. We've got to think about how the organization, how the team, how the system of systems actually works. Now, what are we going to do? Introduce another method? No. The first thing is obviously start understanding. Start understanding what's going on here. And that doesn't mean, only understanding analytical stuff. That helps a lot too. I'll show you a little bit about it later. But first of all, understanding what people in this system need in order, to get something solved. People on teams, people in between teams, product owners. What people outside the organization, outside our system, stakeholders need and currently don't get from the system. That's very important to start this dialogue, because what we want to achieve here is not only looking at the system, but we want to engage for a process which should be a kind of enabler for a kind of journey. And this journey is finally about improvement. Improvement from where we are at the moment towards where we should go if we want to be successful in our business, in our specific domain. And that's very, again, context specific. Not every organization has to run a marathon. If you don't have to run a marathon, you don't need to train for it. And vice versa. Some organizations rather go for marathon than for 100-meter sprints. So you have to understand your system, understand the purpose, the context you're in. Although most organizations now have to speed up, that's for sure. Now, the way we approach this, and those guys in the room, I think it was more or less on the left side, and from your side on the right side, who are into Kanban, have already a kind of consideration. Might he now talk about Kanban? Because Kanban is a little bit about this. It's exactly coming up with these approaches saying we don't introduce a new method because Kanban basically is not, well, not a new methodology. It doesn't prescribe anything. It's just coming and helping us to understand the system better in a way where we do not, bump against resistance. We do not start by saying, I think you should reorganize this team and this guy should actually take over another role, or we should introduce a new role, whatever it is. We try to be like water, and water flows around the rocks. It doesn't try to immediately shift away, at least not the strong rocks, at least not if the water is not really strong coming down from any a disaster, catastrophe. But let's think about this metaphor. We want to change something in an organization, so we start with understanding the system. We start with inviting for a dialogue, understanding unmet needs, and we want to be like water. Now, if we take a Kanban perspective, which we obviously want to do here because that's the title of the talk, then you also know out of the last step, the first step with Kanban is start with what you do now. Now, we are in a Scrum context. That's where we came from. And that basically means we start where we are now. No change to any method. Oh, we've got Scrum here now. There is no change in roles. We've got a product owner, hopefully Scrum Masters, and a kind of team, whatever it is, maybe cross-functional, maybe not. And what we currently have, we want to start with in order to start a process of better understanding how we work here together, and from this perspective, actually drive out improvement opportunities. That's basically options for change. And the people are invited to take these options. We're not opposed to do anything. We're trying to raise a little bit the stress level maybe to make people aware of what's here going on or not going on in order to do something about their system, but it's not being opposed from top. No new method here. And again, for those who are into Kanban, this is a board, a type of visualization you see here. And if you're coming from the Scrum world, you might say, that's not a Scrum board. With Scrum, we also visualize work, but we call it to do, doing, done. That's fair enough, because we have cross-functional teams. They work in one column together. Well, we go into the team level, and what we do here is we try to break down more details out of what we are doing here. It should help us to understand our process better. And what we do here is we dive into the information discovery process, as we call it. This is not a process to follow like a sequential thing. It basically still means you can work everywhere in parallel, and even more important, everybody can work everywhere. So if I'm a tester, maybe I used to be a tester, I'm not allowed to be called a tester anymore, maybe in certain environments. I can do analysis, I can do development, and vice versa. It's up to the people. It's only about saying we drive work which is needed from somebody. Somebody's got a demand. From left to right, it's just in this case, could be different. And from maximum uncertainty on the left, we don't know much about it, we become more clever, we get more insights, and we get more information on board in order to finally deliver what we were asked for. So the information discovery process, getting deeper on what we usually do in a Scrum environment, is the first possible step. And that will usually also help to figure out also obstacles in the system. Maybe there is a dependency on another team where sometimes some database specialists look into our tickets. Then we might have a compartment here where we visualize tickets going out. And we will have a strong focus on what happens to these tickets or user stories or features, whatever it is. Now, what we also do here, and that's what you already see, we do not only let work flow in and start it arbitrarily, we also think about limiting work in process. And that's a very common practice in Kanban because we understand that, first of all, parallel work is not helping us a lot as an individual. It basically is like, the more work we do in parallel, the slower it all gets. So the throughput, the lead time will all become worse. On the other hand side, it also means when there is an issue in our team, it just doesn't mean we will start a new topic, and let the issue go and get another problem and let another ticket come in. Because the system at a certain point in time will be filled up, and then it points us to the fact to say, hey, we get to do something about it. And last but not least, we're tracking actual lead time data. How long did it take for each of those from the left to the right to reach the customer or whoever is on the right side, product owner, whoever it is? And over quite a short period in time, we will suddenly see potentially such figures coming up, a lead time distribution. So that's a behavior for a certain type of work, because each of these lanes, I've got here's 2 swim lanes if you saw it, has different type of work in there. Not every work is equal. Maybe that is features, maybe that's small change requests or whatever, support tickets. And we suddenly understand the capability of the team for this type of work, because it tells us, oh, actually, these guys, for this work, at least it takes 5 days. And in average, it takes 10 days. And in 85% of all cases, it takes 12 days. And then we've suddenly tickets here, which took 100 days. They were never solved. With this information, and I think I do not want to get into too many details because Vaško will talk about no estimates today. We can support something like no estimates, because we don't have to estimate and guess anymore here. We just look at the profile, what our system currently tells us. If somebody asks us, how long will it take? And I can say 10 days. With a certain risk in a certain dimension, and sometimes it's here. And if the guys say, well, 6 out of 7 times, 85%, that's not really enough for me. I have to make sure that I get it next week. Then I can tell them, okay, there is a risk in here. What will we do as a team to mitigate this risk? And even more important, how will we use this information to become better? Coming back to retrospectives. Not just saying, okay, we get into the retrospectives, have a nice, what should we improve? Maybe 3 points actions, somebody taking care for better coffee, others for, I don't know, everybody showing not up so late during the daily meetings, and so on and so forth. But basically really having focused improvement opportunities and driving experiments from there in order to get this better, fitter. So next one, we want to understand flow, because obviously it's not only about working like Scrum machines. We want to get flow throughout the whole system working. So we will look into where is actually work stopping. Where is it actually not being worked upon? It's already in the team, but nobody continues because it's blocked. There's a quality issue. Somebody's waiting for somebody. We suddenly see there are a lot of wait states here, and that basically drives maybe the risk to the right, longer lead times. And that helps us to understand, hey, based upon, by the way, these wait states here, these little buffers, because now we can measure it. We should improve now something here. And as you know, there are burn-up charts. We even go deeper. We might want to have a kind of cumulative flow diagram, seeing are there any bottlenecks piling up? Is flow actually happening? Because there is obviously somebody out there who is interested in flow. It's customers, markets, product owners, and last but not least, even people. So if we make this happen, if that starts working, people on teams will suddenly experience a kind of relief. We'll suddenly experience, hey, multitasking comes a little bit to an end. We get things out of the door, and we do not only let problems pile up. We make stuff work. And that is really a big relief. And suddenly in the rest of the organizations, senior leaders, product owners, product managers might come and say, hey, what's happening on these teams? They become suddenly predictable. They stick to their promise. They suddenly can answer more of the questions we had before. Now, we were on the team level, on one team level, and there might be many more teams. Let's go to the product owner teams, to the business side. I said already, how do they make their decisions about priorities? And again, for those who are into Scrum, they know it's not easy to sort by business value what we have in our backlog. Maybe we shouldn't even have a backlog. Because what does a backlog mean? It's just an endless queue. And stuff is queuing up, and it's like a wish list. And then there is some stuff in the end there, and people just say, if we Want to know when this comes? Well, just let's calculate, yeah, next year, Christmas. Doesn't even make any sense to take it as a backlog item. Because look back into it after 1 year. Is it very probable that it's still the same requirement, the same technology? Probably not. So let's take it rather like options. Organizations who are working in a more or less uncertainty field, when it's about high technology, competition, fast-moving markets, should have quite a lot of options. They should not have quite a lot of backlogs. Because having a lot of backlogs in these circumstances doesn't allow you for sense and respond. If you're not totally busy, then you're able to actually sense what's going out there, what's going on out there. Well, I got it. I'm Austrian, sorry. And last but not least, we want to have liquidity in our system. Liquidity basically means if I've got a request as a product owner or business, I want to make sure that somebody very soon will react and respond to it and be able to pull it into the system, start working on it, and deliver it fast. We can measure liquidity. I won't drag you into this dark hole now. It's maybe too much. But liquidity actually shows if a business is even responsive to its environment. Now, what I wanted to say here actually was what I didn't. Here is another concept talking about prioritization, because apart from options, here we talk about risk. We actually start clustering each potential item after certain risk categories. Call it cost of delay. But this is actually not the type of calculating cost of delay. It's a kind of qualitative assessment. Just having an understanding, what would happen if this backlog item would not be treated now? Nothing? Well, maybe then it is intangible or it's a standard item, but certainly not a fixed state item. Sometimes we have fixed state stuff. And somebody really needs to take care more for fixed state stuff, that we look more into it. And maybe this team, that's another one for the team, suddenly starts responding to it, and they start creating policies where they write down stuff around their board and just say, if a ticket with it's supposed to be orange, but it looks green. If a green ticket comes into our system, then we will do a more detailed analysis, because it's obviously time sensitive. So we want to make very, very sure that it meets 100% its date. If it's a yellow ticket, we just do t-shirt sizing. Very simple policy. Because again, here 6 out of 7 is perfectly fine. Each Scrum team, product owner can immediately take these quite simple concepts and start having a totally different dialogue. Now, I told you there is no prescription about what we want to do here. It's basically about something which emerges out of what we are doing. We started an improvement journey in one team, in another team, maybe one team after the other. And because one team is connected to the other, there is a dependency from one team to the enterprise architects or database specialists or data center, whatever. We suddenly identify an improvement opportunity, and we'll start a conversation here that here something goes out to another team, and we should agree upon a certain policy here. Maybe this team here should also have a limited input queue, backlog, whatever you call it. So, because if we pump here many things to this team and many others do it, the probability that we never get it back is very high. So improvement opportunities out of this will emerge, and they will not just emerge, by coincidence. We'll have a few feedback loops in here. You already have feedback loops if you're into Scrum. You've got a daily meeting, you've got a sprint planning, you've got a review, a retrospective. You might add some aspects into these meetings or feedback loops, what to look at. Have more focus, more understanding about the system. Data which helps you to make decisions about what to change next, what to improve next. Run it as an experiment. And this might improve your capability. For example, shift your capability to the left, which means shorter leap times, trim the variation, the spread of variation, trim the tail. A couple of things we might see when we successfully run these experiments. And last but not least, make us more agile, because now comes the clue. Agile doesn't mean you're running a lot of agile methods. or do more of Scrum. It doesn't make you more agile. Agile means we are more adaptive to to the requests from our product owners and stakeholders. We are more, let's say, fluent or liquid in what we are doing in the team. We're getting flow done. We're getting something out of the door, feedback very fast, and we are able to deliver fast. That's 3 parameters which you can adjust independently from each other. It's even not necessary to think about time boxes anymore, like for example sprints. And interesting enough, this is what's going to happen in many organizations. So customers of mine start coming and say, well, actually, why are we still depending upon sprints? Because now that we started such a system, we immediately understand when new places, new slots are free, that something can pull into our system. This is actually a pull system. As soon as one spot becomes free, product owners can get together and make a next decision. Or actually, they could have prepared already something, maybe a WIP limit of 3 items. That's going to be the next 3 important things. As soon as the team has one free spot, they pull in the most important one. Yeah? So there is an improvement opportunity, and the improvement opportunity is quite huge. So basically, because, and the larger the system is, large systems are complex and create a lot of delays, a lot of waste, as the lean guys call it, but I don't like to call it waste. It's a little bit, kind of qualifying term. But delays are really, blocking your system on many, many sides. You can expect, really, if you really do it in a proper way, after 3/4 of a year, a increase in throughput by many 100%. Can be 200%, can be 500%. So we get more out of the door, faster. We get it really faster out of the door because of a lead time might shrink down to, 80, 90% of what was it before. So let's wrap that up. The process, if we go for something like a, Kanban, driven Scrum environment, is not prescriptive. It's not about a new method, although we call it Scrumban, but Scrumban is basically a kind of, it's a kind of observation. It's a kind of state what's going on. And this is evolutionary. We do not install it in a way. We just understand there are improvement opportunities. And at each point in our process, we figure out if the process is fit enough, if there is anything we can improve. And the process basically evolves. We become better and better. We introduce maybe certain policies. We understand how we deal with blockers, with problems on the team. We solve problems. We talk with others. We grow basically the social capital, as we call it, inside the organization. So this is an ongoing journey, and Scrumban basically never stops. Maybe at a certain point in time, people will come and say, hey guys, that's not Scrum what you're doing here. But you might say you're damned good at it. So you're really agile because you really, you are at this typical level. We don't really understand it, how it works, but it works perfectly. And to wrap it up into this direction, for me, it's not about, product owners and Scrum teams and Scrum masters. It's exactly about what I wrote here. We want to get product ownership, which is a collaborative effort in our organization, going. So the way we treat our business purpose, risk, and delivery. We want to make teams work not on a single team, but together. It's a system of systems. It doesn't help if we've got a small team here, a small team there, and they're all perfectly performing on their own, but they don't work as a whole team, as a whole system. And Scrum Mastery, finally, is also not about Scrum Masters, but it's actually about what we achieve in terms of impact. And impact basically means customers, our market, recognize what we're doing here. Not just running a few methods and tools and whatever it is. So finally, it's about business agility. And we've got a book out there in 2017 which talks a little bit more about what we heard here in 45 minutes. And you don't have to wait, if you like, until 2017. There will be a couple of tools for free in this case. The book won't be free, but the tools will be free. Available on an ongoing basis, basically this autumn. Hope you got something out of it. That's basically my final slide here. And it'd be interesting if you have any questions. Do we have time for questions, or?
Let's open up the floor.
So, any questions?
None?
Yes, one question. Thank you. Do we have a microphone, or?
Yeah, we do.
Thank you. Here in the middle.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
How do you handle issues or features that have an innovation or research aspect in Kanban?
You mean
do not
highly
really know your target because you have to experiment?
Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks very much. So first of all, not every feature, not every requirement, whatever you call it, is equal. And it's very obvious that for certain features, okay, great, we don't need this anymore, at least not me, I have to readjust it afterwards. For certain features where the uncertainty is very, very high because it might be a new technology, a new market, I don't know, any kind of disruptive environment, we might rather set up for these things a totally specific kind of system where it's about, we talk always about commitment. Where it's more like a lean startup way of working, and a commitment point is basically very far outside of our system. So that basically means we are not about here to commit to anything, but to learn as fast as possible. And there are a couple of considerations here to think about. For example, who would work on such things? If we have an understanding about our system, there might be teams and specialists who are very, very important that flow works. In other terms, in lean, they're sometimes called bottleneck stations. These specialists shouldn't work on such speculative lean startup style work because we, might have interesting outcome in this research discovery thing, but we actually make things worse in other services where we also earn our money with. So these systems we would put into place in different formats, but have a well understanding how to balance it out. I mean, it's a topic on its own to spend another 5 to 6 hours, but I hope there's a kind of understanding what I mean.
We have one question coming from the panel sensor, and we'll get back to the floor. When estimating lead time?
Who is the panels, or what's that?
The panel sensor, the online panel thing that we have.
Okay, I didn't even know.
There's 2 of them.
So whom am I talking to?
Online
estimating
and offline.
lead time. Well, again, the approach here is, like with Scrum, we don't estimate time anyway.
Okay.
I mean, in Scrum, we don't estimate time. But here, it's specifically not about estimating time. Lead time is taken as an as-is factor, so a given factor of a system, and it's just read out of the statistics, if you like, from a distribution. So that's basically it. There's more to say about it, obviously, but core message. Yeah?
A quick question here.
Sorry.
What do you think about this whole relentless and mechanical measurements in Kanban? How does it affect the real outcome and people's motivation? Because those measurements, don't you think, become targets for people?
I mean, first of all, thanks for the question. On the one hand side, I think it's the common question. Don't let it become a target. I mean, we always say, manage the system and invite people in this system to self-organize. So that's the first, kind of principle here. It's not about top-down driven, obviously top-down driven targets, objectives, and measures, and getting into performance payment and all the bad things. You couldn't prevent an organization from doing that, but if you do it in a way where we started with, we wanted to understand better where needs are not met. This is a first kind of tipping point where we never did it maybe before, looking in each other's eyes with respect. We carry values here. And just figure out, why might these people be unhappy? Why are things not met? And then afterwards, the whole game is not about blaming or setting targets. It's basically about understanding and serving a baseline for improvement. So it's really about how you approach it. Like with all the other things, like with Scrum, if you talk about velocity, whatever, the only thing which is different from velocity and story points, which is based upon story points, those are made up. So therefore, they can easily be tweaked. You know, what gets measured gets basically. Yeah? So everybody can say, oh, it was not 5 points, it was actually 8 points, we did more. Lead time is an attribute of our system. We cannot fake it. It's not like, no, my temperature was not 36, it was 38, and I don't go to school now. We cannot fake it. It's data which is there, and it's not about to fake. That's maybe the little nuance here to be looking at. Thank you. Hope that was more or less it.
Still
on
lead time from panel sensor. How do you factor in the task complexity and difficulty?
Well, that's a good question, a very good one. First of all, we want to understand when we use these concepts, if we are about to project the recent past into the near future. Yeah, that's something maybe from Daniel Kahneman, who wrote, I think, something where he got a Nobel Prize for around reference class forecasting. It's a concept we have to understand in order not to project something which is not relevant anymore. So we just have to be clear, how can we distinguish, are we still in the same kind of business? Or are we now in the more totally exploratory world, where at least at the moment we don't have any data points yet for? That's an important point. So we have to look at it. And we even have measures like the one which I mentioned, the liquidity. There is a key factor we use so that we immediately at least get pointed towards this fact. Another detail here, but yeah, we have to consider it. But on the other hand side, we don't need many data points, maybe 7, 11, 20 data points in order to be able again making new projections, to have a distribution which actually shows us again where we are after. There was a question over there. I saw the hand before.
Only one remark. Okay, we don't make estimations, but we are based on statistics in order to give a time to our product manager. Sorry. Okay.
I might point now probably to the next talk, but please, your question.
Based on this technique, we are not making estimations, but we are looking at the statistics. And, okay, we're going to our product manager and say, okay, probably this will be delivered this day. But at the beginning, we don't have statistics. So
yeah, that's what I just said. That's exactly the question.
Okay.
Where I said either we have to come up with a model. Sometimes we come up with a model. We can model such things, of course. On the other hand side, we don't need many data points. So go for 2 or 4 weeks, and you will have enough data points to make quite good projections. Now you might come up and say, well, we need to have a fixed price, time, whatever project scope, all fixed, which is not a good idea, as we know. But how do we model here? Well, we have possibilities, as good as it gets to model it. But it's better than nothing and just driving blind. I know what you mean. It's basically the same question as before. If we are in a total uncertain domain, even with given data, we have to understand that given data does not match the future, the near future anymore. Okay, thanks very much. Is there any other question? 1 or 2. I think organizers go last. No, it's just a joke.
Hello. In your opinion, can you make it really simple so I can understand?
Hopefully.
Yeah, what you actually sum it up. You have Scrum and Kanban. So if you were to say 3 things that Kanban will bring to Scrum so it becomes...
Yeah,
what is that?
First of all, kind of elevator pitch, isn't it? Will you buy it then if I'm good? Scrum is a process, we might have in place for agile product development. And it lacks at certain points kind of system view where we understand end-to-end how we deliver our product. Kanban is an approach to lever potentials to improve with a focus on why we are doing this and how we are basically achieving the goal. The goal is basically stakeholders, customers, but also people inside the system. And so Kanban, basically, you don't even have to give it a name. It's not important. You don't have to call it Scrumban, because it sometimes confuses people. And I already did that once in a customer session where I really stood up and wiped out the term on the whiteboard and just said, let's call it a method without name and focus on what we're talking about here and what we try to achieve. And what we finally want to achieve is improvement, a continuous journey towards becoming fitter and better. And it's not predictable. It's not prescribed. I hope that's somehow wrapping up what I said. There was one more question behind Nikos. Okay?
Okay, one question. What I'm hearing many times that, let's say, the engine in Scrum is the team itself. So the guides say that we need self-organized, cross-functional teams. And when they're seeing Kanban as an approach, and when they see, for example, the different stages of the workflow, they say that, okay, this is more or less close to a waterfall approach, the things that we are doing so far, let's say. So could you please, from your experience and your knowledge, why do you believe that Kanban is a teamwork approach as well?
Yeah, because it doesn't change, first of all, anything about the organization. If you're already there with a Scrum environment, we settled the ground already for self-organization. So we come there, we talk to a team, and as a team, we look at the board. And the only thing we do here is to say, how do we understand our process, which we own, which we work inside, and how do we want to make it clearer for us all together here, how to collaborate there? That's what I meant before with information discovery process. We become more clever collaboratively about what we are doing here. And it just helps to get a little bit more clearer instead of just saying to do, doing, done, because that gives us, it's like driving with fog outside with a little lamp and at 200 kilometers per hour and just saying it will all be good. We just said, okay, step back. We're still self-organized. We still work as a team. But what we do here is we want to get more energy on board in terms of trust. We want to get trust from the outside guys who trust us more. And basically, we can trust our process more if we stick to a couple of policies which we understand better. Like, for example, saying, don't start arbitrarily, work because it's just possible. Understand that the more work we start, the less we get out of the door. Therefore, WIP limits. And when problems arise, let's not just ignore the problems. WIP limits help us to focus more on problems, because at a certain point in time, there might be only blocked tickets or features or user stories on our board. And now it's really up to us to say, okay, let's pull in something new, start something new because we can't do anything about it, or start our improvement journey. And that's always about a collaborative effort. So it's more or less about how you want to frame it. And no method in the world basically gives you guarantee. Hope that was more or less giving you my standpoint, because I'm not sure where it's, if it's somewhere written in a certain way. Okay, I think there is no more time as far as I understood.
Yeah, true. That is a true story.
Yeah.
And wait till you see an energized room after coffee break.
Okay, so thanks for being here. Wish you a nice evening, and thanks for joining.